Hi, welcome to the Luminary Lens, where heart meets strategy and stories spark transformation. I'm Rebecca Kaykas-Wolff. I'm a corporate marketer, salon curator, and your host. Today, I'm joined by John Hagel. He's a longtime strategist and author of The Journey Beyond Fear, and he's a pioneer in rethinking how we lead in complexity. John, I'm so excited to have you in my inaugural podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time. We've had the pleasure of working together in a salon that I hosted in May, talking about your book, as well as kind of fear being an unfortunate detractor for the way that we can actually manage our lives and our professional lives really well, and especially in this age of AI. I'd love to talk a little bit about your origin story, if you wouldn't. I think it's super interesting, and why you are on the path of talking about fear. And if you could just give some of that context about how you got started and the concept.
Well, it's a long story. I've been on a long journey for sure, but my passion in work and life has been looking out into the future to see emerging opportunities and helping others to see them, and then hopefully motivating them to address the opportunities. And unfortunately, what I found was that over the years, there was more and more resistance to looking into the future and addressing opportunities. And so it motivated me. I was trained as a strategist in my career. I came to believe strategy was everything, but I've come now to believe that actually psychology is more important than strategy. And I on reflection and on the experiences that I've had, I've realized that a lot of the resistance that I was encountering was the growing emotion of fear around the world. And that's what motivated me to write my book, because I wanted to help people make that journey.
You talk about the resistance that you came across. And I know in previous conversations that we've had, there's research that kind of embodied some of that. Would you be willing to share some of that, the research that helped you kind of come up with that thesis around resistance?
The research, I've done a lot of research on many things, but one of the key things was the long-term trends that are reshaping our global economy and society. And I've come to call it the big shift, because I believe there is a profound transformation that we're going through. And it has many dimensions to it. One dimension is mounting performance pressure. It takes many different forms. One is intensifying competition on a global scale, not just competition across companies, but also across individuals. We're competing for work with people in other countries, and competition at the government, political level. So there's increasing competition. On the other side, there's also accelerating pace of change. Things we thought we could count on are no longer there. And as if that weren't enough, because of all the connectivity, we're seeing extreme disruptive events that come in out of nowhere and leave us scrambling to figure out what to do. So that's a lot of pressure, and any one of those, but all three together. And I think it's very understandable that as humans, one of the reactions is the emotion of fear. And so I believe that's driving a lot of the spread of this emotion around the world.
Fascinating. But you also talk about, like in your book, you lay out the roadmap for moving from kind of a negative fear-based construct into more of a curiosity construct. And fear as a motivator can actually be a really beneficial thing to get some things done, but in a negative construct, not so much. But when you talk about moving from curiosity and empathy and making an impact with that, you talk about this explorer mindset. Can you expand on that a bit more?
Again, I have to be careful. I don't like to call it mindset, because my focus increasingly is on emotions, not thoughts in the mind. And I think one of the things, again, this is based on research. I looked at environments around the world where there was extreme performance improvement on a sustained basis. And I said, what can we learn from those environments? One of the things was that all the participants in those environments, even though they were very diverse, not just business environments, but sports and all kinds of activities, one of the common elements of all the participants was they had a very specific form of passion. which I've come to call the passion of the explorer. And that's where the exploration comes in. People with this passion are excited about having more and more impact in a specific domain. They're never satisfied with any impact they've already achieved. It's always, what can I do more? How can I do more? And they get excited when they're confronted with unexpected challenges. This is an opportunity to learn more and have even more impact. And then the other element is that when confronted with those challenges, their first reaction is, who else can I connect with who can help me get to better answers faster? Because no matter how smart or intelligent I am, I'm going to get to better answers faster with other people working with me. And so they're constantly reaching out, asking for help. And it's one of the reasons that people with this passion have built deep trust-based relationships, because they're always expressing vulnerability.
Oh, I love that. So this idea of community and collaboration is probably more important now than it has been before, especially with rapid advancements in technology like AI. It's interesting when you're talking about that. There are two more recent studies out. One was released, I want to say yesterday or the day before, by MIT, and another, Stanford's been doing some longer term research that I was on a webinar yesterday and I was listening to. But with rapid advancement with AI, when you talk about passion, that's an inherently human kind of construct, maybe, and you're correct me with my terminology. But the reason I bring this up is because in both of those studies, what they're learning, and MIT's was focused around ChatGPT in particular, was that whereas we're able to gather a lot of information really quickly, the enthusiasm or the willingness to dig in from this human base, there wasn't as much enthusiasm or ownership, because the machine did the work. And Stanford actually found the same to be true in their study, is that whereas you could make like the perfect backpack, was this MBA program, and the AI tools could actually have you build this product for you and it could be perfect, the enthusiasm wasn't there, and people were less inclined to actually dig in and want to make a company around that. And so with those studies that are very new and out, I'm curious how your construct and concept around this explorer component can actually shape that even more as we are starting to learn more. Do you have any reflections or thoughts based on what I just mentioned?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's interesting. Again, in my experience, in the business world, very few companies measure passion of the explorer. And I think it's because in the business environments we've created, large organizations around the world, passion is suspect. Passionate people ask too many questions. They deviate from the script. They take too many risks. Why would you want a passionate person? You want somebody who will just read the manual and do the job as assigned. And I think if those are the people, and by the way, I did other research. I actually surveyed in the U.S. workforce to find out how much passion there was among workers. And at most, my finding was that 14% of the U.S. workers have this kind of passion about their work. And I'm actually surprised that it's as much as 14%, because given the environment being so hostile to it, it's great that 14% were able to hold on to it. But I think in the context of your question, that my experience is if people have this real passion of the explorer and they're working with AI, they get even more excited, because now they have more information, more advice, more things to work with to get even greater impact. But they're constantly driven to, how can we get to the next level? And the key is asking more and more questions. I mean, they don't stop asking questions. It's in their spirit.
Very entrepreneurial quality. So when you talk about metrics, though, you've done so much work. So your work at Deloitte, you've been in consulting your entire, like the bulk of your career. How would you advise a corporation in lots of different pockets of that business, like whether it's marketing or product or engineering or sales or human resources? of one, the importance of measurement of this concept of passion, and the ROI or outcome, or what, and then also what the KPIs could be. And I know that you've done some work in these areas too, but how do you advise, and how do they do it?
Yes, well, again, it's challenging because the culture is very driven to just doing things more efficiently. I call it the scalable efficiency model. The key to success is just do things faster and cheaper, and you'll be successful. And unfortunately, one of the things that, again, in my research, I looked at how have companies done with all this amazing digital technology? How has performance improved? And I went back to 1965, a few years before digital technology really came into business in a big way, until 2019, pre-COVID. And I looked at, as the measure of performance, and there are reasons for choosing this, but return on assets. And I said, how has return on assets improved over that time period from 1965 to 2019? Return on assets has collapsed. 1965 until 2019, it has declined by 75%. And there is no indication of it leveling off, much less turning around. So for the executives who believe that this approach to scalable efficiency is the winning approach, sorry, but they're not demonstrating that in their metrics, in their performance. So,
And the data is showing that. Are there any companies or businesses that you see are doing that better than others?
Have to be a bit contrarian here. I'm in Silicon Valley. I've been in Silicon Valley for over 40 years, and I've seen so many entrepreneurial startups where the entrepreneurs are driven by this passion of the explorer. You can see it in them and in the people they're bringing into the enterprise. But in my experience, once they achieve a certain scale, their investors come to them and say, you need to get some adult supervision. Some seasoned executives of large companies who know how to manage large businesses. And those executives come in and they crush the passion. Scalable efficiency. Forget about passion. Just do things faster and cheaper. And so I think that's a significant challenge.
With the idea of preparing for an exit, it's interesting that you bring that up. Because like all of the incubators, all of the like startup studios, they want that curiosity, and that's the investment and bet they're making is on that person and like that talent pool. But the way the economics of what success is in business is predicating a completely different set of KPIs. And so again, it kind of gets back to how would you advise like a balance or a mix of that? And if it can be proven that the scalable efficiency is actually not working anymore, and with the advancements of AI, what would you actually counsel a startup studio or maybe a VC to do things differently, or advise, or even that startup that's trying to do things differently?
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, I think that first of all, I do hear a lot from senior executives of large companies that they're prisoners of their investors. Their investors want quarterly performance, and if they miss by a point or two, they're going to lose their job. So that's all I can focus on. Don't distract me. I understand the pressure and the fear that's being manifested, but my response is, when was the last time you went to the investors and articulated a really inspiring, huge opportunity out in the future that you're going to pursue and will exponentially increase the returns that you've been able to generate so far? And they look at me and say, come on, John, I can't do that. The future's too uncertain. Well, the response is, what do you expect investors to measure you on? All they have is quarterly performance. So the counterexample that I offer here is a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Jeff Bezos, who in the early days of Amazon went to the investment community and said, if you're looking for short-term performance, I'm not the company to invest in. I'm going after an exponentially large opportunity in the internet. So you need to focus on that. And I'm sorry if I go on too long, but in that context, I've become a strong proponent of a specific approach to strategy for leaders, um, which I call zoom out, zoom in. But it was based on looking at some of the most successful technology companies in Silicon Valley. They have this approach, um, and it basically focuses on two time horizons. One is 10 to 20 years. And the question on that horizon is, what is this exponentially large opportunity that we could be pursuing? And then they zoom in to 6 to 12 months. And on that horizon, the questions are, what are the 2 or 3 initiatives, no more, 2 or 3 that we could pursue in the next 6 to 12 months that would accelerate our movement towards that longer term destination? And have we committed a critical mass of resources to those initiatives? And in the context of what we've been talking about, I've come to see that this can be a very powerful way of helping people to overcome fear. Because on the one side, if you can identify an exponentially large opportunity in the future, it starts to build some excitement. But a lot of people driven by fear are still going to be extremely skeptical and say, well, come on, that's just a fantasy. That's never going to happen. But if you can show tangible and increasing progress in the 6 to 12 month period, all of a sudden you start to overcome that skepticism, and people start saying, how can I join? How can I participate in this?
Thank you for sharing that. The visual that you get about the zoom in, zoom out it makes a ton of sense. And it reminds me of the reality that innovation within large and small companies is largely, how do I say it? It's largely predicated upon the leadership, that either they're great strategic leaders or they're better operational leaders, right? And so you've actually got a discipline in innovation that, while we know that innovation exists, there really isn't management or discipline around that philosophy within companies that is as metriced, if you will, as other disciplines like marketing or sales or product development or engineering or something else like that. And so, as I referred to some of those studies by Stanford and MIT, Perry Kleben, who's a professor at Stanford, was talking exactly about that, about the fact that innovation needs management, and that if you can actually set up the right processes and kind of repeatable success, you can actually build that more consistently. And so it's really great that I think that the conversations around AI in particular and the rapid advancements attached to it are forcing a lot more of this kind of operational conversation as well. So how do you operationalize this ability to be creative and knowing that that will have a better return ultimately, but it's a longer term game than a short term quarter over quarter?
In my experience, at least, when I build trust with senior leaders and get them in the privacy of their office, they have 2 questions for me. How quickly can I automate? And how many jobs can I eliminate? And, that's the scalable efficiency model. It's just cut costs wherever possible. And I think it's one of the reasons more and more people are experiencing fear, because even though the executives don't go out and give speeches about eliminating jobs and, efficiency in that context, people see and know that that's really the driver that's focusing the leadership on AI. And so I think it's a real challenge.
Interesting. What would you say, like, given that, and like, what is your response to those questions to you? It's like, I'm sure that you advocate for a different philosophy, but how do you actually move from that strategic operational company approach to a new approach like you're advocating? How do you actually move somebody through that pathway?
Well, it's complicated. Again, a lot of it's about psychology, and it's very much dependent on the individual that you're dealing with or the group that you're dealing with. But in my experience, it's really helping people to look ahead and see these really large opportunities. One of the things I do with a lot of companies around the world is bring them on what I call learning journeys to Silicon Valley so that they can actually see what is happening today. It's not just some imaginative future. It's happening today. and start to get excited about what it could mean for their business if they actually applied some of this technology. And it's focusing on the opportunity side versus the threat side. And that's can be very helpful in moving people into a more positive view and using AI to help drive that growth. I mean, um, I'll just give one quick story about it's kind of related. A clinical laboratory company, very large one, and globally was experiencing increasing customer churn rates. Customers were leaving at an accelerating rate, and the call center operators were leaving at an accelerating rate because they were so frustrated. He called them all together. He called the whole department together, the call center department. He said, first thing, none of you are going to lose your jobs. You will all have work. Second thing is your next assignment is to go work with the IT department to figure out how you can automate as many of the routine calls that you're currently dealing with and that are consuming all your time and get that off your chest. Then your third assignment is find those problems that you've never seen before, that are really difficult, that aren't part of this manual or the script, and come together into small groups. He called them pods that would problem solve and help to figure out how to address these unseen problems. And customer satisfaction went way up. Worker passion went way up because they were making a difference now. They were doing things that nobody else had ever done. That was exciting, and constantly looking for new problems that customers were experiencing that they could help on.
Yeah, it reminds me, and are you talking about kind of invoking a lot more empathy in some of the, like in that case, it was a customer service kind of complexities, but is that kind of empathy, like an empathy forward approach to dealing with customer service or the opportunity side of solving problems, like understanding customer needs, pain points, addressing? Is that how you would also define that?
Yeah, it's complicated. I mean, empathy, I think, is a critical ingredient in this. It's the notion of focusing on the emotions of the people you're dealing with. What are their emotions? What are what are they experiencing? It's only helpful if you really have this passion to improve the emotions of the people you're dealing with. Versus, no, that's scary. They're more angry or whatever. No, that's not good. And I think that's where this, again, the passion of the explorer comes in, is when you look at the emotions and you see the emotions are not good, you're driven to have more impact, to find ways to help them move their emotions to excitement and passion.
No, that's great. If there's one takeaway that you could give, like an operational leader within a big company, what would it be to institute something like this, even if the structure is based on commercial success? But if there's one way to institute this philosophy or this change, what would be the biggest impact and maybe change opportunity?
Well, again, it's complicated. It hinges on a lot of elements, but in my experience, transformation, and I talk about this at a very fundamental level, transforming everything, is very scary to people. And
Yeah.
I've over the years come to have great respect for the immune system and the antibodies that, in my experience, exist in every large organization and will mobilize to crush any effort to change. And
Yeah.
these are not evil people. They're very well-intentioned people, but they're driven by fear. And the fear says, don't
Yep.
change, just hold on to what you have and squeeze harder, and somehow you'll make it through. And so, in
Right.
my experience, the best way to drive change is not to go top down and change everything. It's find an edge to your existing business that today is relatively marginal, but has the potential to scale to become the core of
Yeah.
your business. And this is where, again, zoom out, zoom in comes in. And zoom out, you see where that opportunity is. Find an edge and then recruit and motivate a group of passionate people to join that edge, to start to scale it and show what can be accomplished with passion and excitement and focusing on growth as opposed to just efficiency.
Right. No, that's great. Are you seeing anybody, kind of back to the question, is anybody doing it well? Do you see like larger corporations with great brands out there? Is anybody doing it well? Or at least are they trying? Is there an example?
Unfortunately, no. I think that one of the things is many companies now are creating lots of uh, innovation centers or a portfolio of innovation investments. But the problem there is if you've got all these investments and one of them starts to go south and not work, no problem. I've got 15 others. Um, Scaling the edge, as I call it, is focusing on committing to one edge and doing whatever is necessary for that edge to survive. And then the other problem is that for a lot of large companies, they will find an edge or they'll acquire a company, an innovative company outside, and try to integrate it into the core of their business.
Yeah.
And the core crushes all that innovation. They don't want to see that. That's, just too distracting. Let me just focus on what I'm doing. And so I think that the challenge is really, again, focusing on scaling an edge on the side and driving more and more of the passion and overcoming the fear that people have within the core of the business.
Interesting. And by edge, you define that as competitive differentiation. So if I have a gap, maybe as a technology company, and I might either want to incubate that within my company or I want to buy that. That's what you mean by edge.
Well, edge, in the way I talk about it, it's relatively marginal to the existing business. It's kind of not even on the radar of a lot of. If you look into the future, you can see that edge could become the new core of your business. Again, that's a key requirement. It's not just a diversification effort or an innovation effort. It is going to be the new core of our business. That's what we're going to focus on scaling and developing an entirely different culture that's focused on drawing out passion and overcoming fear versus feeding the fear.
Right. That kind of gets back to your earlier point about Amazon. Starting as a digital bookstore being so much more than that. That North Star was so much more than that original starting point. I really appreciate the conversation. And is there anything, like any takeaway that you would like to leave us with? Like, what's your personal North Star metric for companies that want to embrace this, for instance?
Well, I think the North Star ultimately is growth and profitability. Are you, in fact, addressing unmet needs in the marketplace that have never been addressed before and in a differentiated way to other people? And that's the essence of strategy. But again, I think most companies are just focused on do whatever we're doing now faster and cheaper. And that's the key to success. So it's really being excited about the unmet needs that are out in the marketplace and the opportunity that it creates.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, time, and taking time today to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. For those of you listening, would love for your comments, feedback, and any questions that you might have. And you can always hashtag Luminary Lens. And so if you believe business needs more curiosity, more courage, and more humanity, The Journey Beyond Fear is a must read. And this conversation is just the beginning, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Appreciate the interest for sure.